Okay, I have found a way to go back and forth between Maya and MotionBuilder and back to Maya again, and be able to preserve our driven keys. And this just requires that we separate our head rig from the rest of our body here, so that as we rotate things around, the head rig doesn't come with it and effectively doesn't actually come into MotionBuilder at all. We have to reattach it after we've done all of our editing in MotionBuilder, which isn't a big problem. But there is a process involved. So right now, our head rig is, if I bring the outliner over here, currently parented underneath some of our other joints here. So if I select the base control of the head rig and hit Shift P to unparent, that will separate it off. Which means now as I rotate things, and I rotate the whole body, for instance, that the head rig just sort of sits behind, which is really what I want. Also, as I bring it over to MotionBuilder, there's only a couple things that I really need to bring over. The first is just grabbing the root of the skeleton and then shift-clicking to grab the body as well. And I'm just going to cycle through here to make sure that there isn't any animation on here already. And I think that should be fine. Now, just checking all together, just make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and say send to MotionBuilder as a new scene. And I'll bring MotionBuilder over here as it waits to get that information. Let me just pause the video while it does that. Okay, we're back. All right, now the thing that you probably have noticed is that there are certain blend shapes, probably the ones that are actually set up to the driven keys, that come in all on, which makes her have like this really big bloated face. And you can turn those off if you want. You do need to go into, grab that there, window, and let me just find it really quick. I think it's I already have it open. I just have to scroll down here in properties. It's all these ones here that can just be brought down if you really feel the need. But regardless, when you bring these back into Maya, when you bring the whole thing back into Maya, it won't have these enabled. So this is just some kind of weird artifact issue of bringing things across. If it just looks weird to you and you don't like it, then you can change it down here just to make it look better. But we can pretty much safely ignore that for the purposes of doing what we need to do here. Okay, so we have a properly defined skeleton, and we need to create a control rig for this. So I'll just create a control rig as FKIK. All right, and that's actually working a heck of a lot better than it was before. I'm surprised. Before I brought this in here and I couldn't even move the arms for some reason. I don't really know why that's actually working nicely now, whereas before it wasn't. Okay. Regardless, let us now bring in some kind of animation. So this would be like I had on the desktop here somewhere. The scratch, which is in here, I believe. There we go. And we'll bring it all in. It's not a problem. And we get our actor. And now we want to have our actor drive our control rig. And that should be working okay. There it is. And just make sure that when we do this, coming in here onto the characters, click our character name, and under retargeting, make sure we click match source. Okay, so that should all be moving fine now. And I'll come up and say bake plot to control rig. Again, just test. Good. And we should be able to turn off the visibility of our actor. There we go. Great. And presumably we can still move that around. We can. Good. Cool. So we've gone through and we've taken care of all the major issues there. Now on frame 0, I do want to have a 0 frame because otherwise I don't have a frame that's similar to what the original T-pose was. And to do this, I'm just going to drag a selection around everything. And I'll go in, and I probably don't actually need to have the body selected, so I'll just Control Shift the body. I said Control Select the body. And I'm going to come down here into not the markers section, but into the body, into the actual section 4, rotations on, let's just see if I can find it real quick. Just see if this is what I want right here. No, I don't think so. Undo that real quick. Let me just drag a selection around here again. This was working before. And just scrolling down. Models, that's probably what I want. That's actually on 0. Transformation options. Hold on one second. Let me just pause the video real quick while I figure out what I am not seeing here real quick. Okay, so all I did was this. I went to Display, and I went to X-Ray, and now just when I make a selection around everything, seems to be performing better. I'm not sure why it wasn't working before. So I'm just going to come down here under Markers where it says Rotation, and I'm going to, even though these already say they're at 0, I'm going to just type 0 again on each of them, and it will give me a T-pose on that frame. So I'll just key that there, and hopefully that's locked into position, which is good. Now, with all that done, we should be able to send this back to Maya. So let's select everything and File, Send to Maya, and we want to update the current scene. And it's just bringing it in. There we go. Cool. So we got our T-pose there at 0, and everything else is moving fine. Now, it's this 0 pose that I actually am the most interested in. There's no great way to do this aside from just going in and selecting basically the root, and I'll come to the side, and I'm trying to get this as much to a default pose as possible. I have gone ahead and taken care of the rotations, but it's actually the translations now that matter. So I don't really want to rip the feet off the ground. I just need to get them kind of like into a default height. And the torso is probably mostly okay. But now what I need to do is bring the face controls forward and just match it up here because they are no longer really matching. In fact, actually, I like the fact that the face controls are right at the origin there. And what is missing out of all this is if I go ahead and grab the feet controls and the center control, you'll notice that this whole thing is not at the center. So I'm just going to try to bring it back as close as I can to the center. Okay. That's caused feet to rotate in a weird way. In fact, I might not need to bring the feet. It's relatively irrelevant where the feet are compared to everything else here, so long as they don't do really stupidly weird things. I just grab that, put that in the center, and I'm doing that because I want the head in the center as well. And it's mostly in the center, so we're like really close, but I can grab the head control and probably just move that back as well, just to get everything as centered as possible. Okay. Since it is the 0 frame, nobody's ever going to see it. But it will make it nicer in terms of matching up our controls. I think that should be fine. Now when we bring these forward, they should be closer to matching. We'll bring this down, okay, and from the front view, hopefully this will match up as nicely as possible. So we get the lips kind of more or less matching there, the eyes, that looks good. And that's pretty much where it would have been to start, normally. In fact, I can actually go in, since I made all those translations there, I'll just go in and freeze transformations on that. See if it'll let me freeze transformations on just that one object. No, that's interesting. That's okay. It's not like a huge deal. I've just rotated it. I just want to see what happens when I rotate it like this, because it was at 0. It wasn't at 0. I'm not really sure why. In fact, it looks like it should be at 0 because that gets like evened out. So let's just put that back to 0 there. I imagine that this would sort of be in line with that there. And so long as nothing disappears in the face, I think that's probably about the right point for it. Normally this would have probably matched up to this joint here, but I think that's just a little bit too high for our model here. So it's, I'm just kind of arbitrarily trying to figure out where it all goes. Now, what controls what? So I need this to be controlled by the existing movements of the model, which means that this should be parented underneath this. So let's go ahead and select our neck control and try to select just this little joint here. So shift select that and parent, and hopefully that looks like that worked. Okay. A couple of things got left behind there. I'll figure out what those are in a second. But now the head control comes along with it, though it does seem a little bit off there. So maybe that's not exactly the right control to parent it to. Let's just go back and take a look at that. Undo. Let's go ahead and parent it to this one instead. No, that's still not quite getting it right. I believe I had this better before. Seemed like it was working fairly seamlessly before. Let's go ahead, and it doesn't really matter where it's parented to so long as it gets the right information. Let's try parenting it to the top here. That one. Looks like that whole joint, that whole thing is like a joint. So I parented it there before, and I had a little bit of an offset while that was moving around. Let me just play around with this a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what is the nature of that offset. Ultimately, since that joint there is one of the ones that was created by MotionBuilder, let's try, instead of putting it there, let's try parenting it to this joint up here, which is just the end effector for the head. I really swear that this was like working better before, but this is the great mystery of working in Maya. All right, so it's following that. We're not using this to rotate from anymore, not at least in this example. So if I were to go in and I wanted to rotate the head again, I would be grabbing, not necessarily that joint, but I would be grabbing this thing here, right? And I'd be using that to rotate around. And that's going to move this around. So ultimately, I could probably hide the visibility of that one thing, but unfortunately that's hiding the visibility of everything. I think that has to do with the way it's parented, so we could probably set that up so that it doesn't end up doing that. Okay, so that solves the major issue, but the real test here is, let's just give ourselves a small frame range. The real test is, can we go from having our eyelids open to close? Let's just say eyelid open left. See, it's still working. That's good. Eyelid close. All right. So let's just go ahead here at frame 1 and set a key and say key, and come in here at frame. This is our animations that must have come in at a different frame rate somehow, which is weird. It just have to test that, check that when we come back into Maya. So that's just not really relevant to our discussion here, but close key. All right, and just watch. And it looks like it's not working, but I think that has to do with the nature of my tangent types. Sorry, I couldn't think of the right word. So over here, eyelid open left. Okay. Close left, that's what I want. There we go. Just make sure that, not sure what frame range we're on here. Let me just go in. I'm going to undo that real quick. This frame rate here, I'm not really sure what the hell it is. There we go. Should be at, okay, cool. I changed the frame rate down here to 24 frames per second, and that seems to work better. Let me just verify in my animation settings that we are in just linear. Save. And again, we'll key this. Key selected and close there. I don't know why it's going to 9.6, but whatever. Okay, I see what's going on here. I just paused the video there, and my frame range was only going down to 9.6, so I put it out to 10. All right, so you can see that it actually does work, but here's the issue. For some reason, all of these, everything, is sort of also baked in here on the head as well, which is a bit odd. So let's just go ahead, and that might have been what happened when I parented it up here, but let's just go ahead and delete all these keys. So break connections. And that way there's no keyframes. They were all keyed to 0 basically. So even if I was keying here at 0 and over here at 10, all these other ones were at 0, so it would only go from 0 to 10 right there. Same, I think I clicked on the wrong one before. So break connections. All right. Now, key eyelid close left, key selected. And at 10, key it there again. And there we go. Now she's working. All right, so just a few things. I mean, it's obviously way more cumbersome than it needs to be. That's the big problem, but it is what it is. And I can still move this around, which is good. So, so there you go. In fact, we'd probably end up putting that on its own layer, right? The only last thing that really sort of stands out here are these upper eyelid joints, which somehow have been disconnected somewhere in there. They should be parented, and I'm not really sure why they get disconnected, but it should be easy enough to figure out how to reparent them and keep them in the right location. They just need to follow a joint, which, let's just see here. Do we see joints? Show joints. Not really sure where all those other joints have ended up, unless they got converted into something else. There's a joint here, right? Turn off polygons. All right. So yeah, there's this joint here, and looks like everything else pretty much got turned into stuff. Now I think what might have happened, in fact, actually I know the reason why I have a sort of a weird result here is I think before when I did this, I had actually separated the this joint from this joint here. So the skeleton that got created was only from, the arms and whatnot. But that's okay. If we go back to 0 here, and I brought these forward, right? This should ultimately, actually, I'll bring both of them forward. Oh, I forgot there's 2 on top of each other. Let's bring these down. So they both sit on top of their respective eye joints. So, okay. But they need to be parented, and they should be parented ultimately to the head. Now, I'm not really sure if this is going to work or not. I'm going to put them where I think they should be, but if they don't work that way, then I'm going to change that. So we grab the child, we grab the parent. This damn thing is really hard to select. So I'm going to put it on, or to not select. I'm going to put it on its own layer and hide it. All right, so there we go. P. All right, and that's one of them. Let's just see what happens when we do that. Does it follow properly? Looks like it does. Okay, cool. This makes it easier to select this one now. And same, P. Grab this one, P. And then just grab the last one, and P. We can turn that back on. I somehow made that yellow now. Don't know why that's yellow now, but that's okay. Show polygons, and I think that solves all of our major issues, right? Put this out to like 600, Make sure it plays okay. Okay, cool. And so long as everything's following along and she's got like one closed eye, yeah, I think we're in business. So that's my solution. It's a pain in the ass, but it works. So there you go, and hopefully that is of help.